Deathbed, Principality. Together, they gathered not only for the needs of the castle but for the omen that weighed heavier than all others, the sickness of King Kolkor. Sir John leaned forward, the firelight catching his stern profile. The king's body may falter, but his crown does not. Until he returns, or Yyth calls him home, it is my vow to hold order. I will not see the realm divided. The king's breath wanes, though he still clings to this world, Yondel murmured, tracing his finger across the circular mark he had drawn earlier, a wheel broken at its rim. The signs tell me his spirit walks near the river of passing, unable to choose its bank. Divided it already is, Jirim rasped, his voice like parchment rubbed thin. Shardel sharpens his temper like steel, thirsting for battle, while Ikim drowns in wine and the warmth of bought company. They are sons in name, but heirs in little else. The omens show a sundering, two branches twisted apart. We must usher a calling to the corners of the realm, Yondel said, his voice grave, for those who will seek answers to the king's recovery. The divining of key individuals to our success need be hidden from all, Jirim said. Even the air may carry treachery, and shadows are not always empty. Arthur scribbled the words with quick strokes, then set the quill down and leaned forward. His eyes, though accustomed to ledgers and tallies, were sharp now with something more than household concern. Very well, he said. We set the lists, tonight. He unrolled a fresh parchment, dipped the quill, and began, each syllable deliberate as though crafting a spell. The assassin, he said first, the word catching like flint upon stone. The two dwarves, one a cleric, the other a tinker. The diplomat, Silvercrest, the ranger. These will accompany Ikim to Lake Raven. The quill scratched its path across the page, binding the names as surely as oath or law. Arthur did not pause. The other group, of rangers and rogues, will go forth with the soldiers to Red Shale. All others will search as they wish, across the realm and across the sea. He finished the line with a hard dot of ink, then set the quill aside and blew gently on the parchment to dry it. For a long moment, only the crackle of the lamps filled the chamber. Sir John at last raised his eyes, the steel of his gaze tempered by faith. So it is decided. But mark this well, none of these parties must know the fullness of their purpose. To Lake Raven they may go for merriment or respite, yet they are chosen by omen, not by whim. If any among them falters, then Yyth will see the whole of our labor undone. Yondel nodded, his expression solemn. Shardel will remain here, he added, voice steady as a mason's stone. He is eldest of the king's adopted sons, and though restless for war, he must serve as warden of the principality. The throne must not sit unguarded while others wander. He will keep the walls, the gates, and the laws. The kingdom's heart must not falter. Jirim's lips curled, not quite into a smile. A warden is not always a keeper. A restless blade may cut outward as easily as inward. Yet perhaps the walls need teeth as much as hands. I hope Lord Yyth doesn't know that, Arthur replied grimly, calling out. The principality waited, divided, yet bound by faith. Messengers carried summons, chosen companions prepared for their journeys, and omens whispered in every shadow. Yondel charted the stars nightly, Arthur scrawled long lists of stores, and Jirim muttered of dreams where rivers ran backward, and crowns cracked like pottery. Sir John prayed at dawn and dusk, his sword ever near, guarding both king and realm. And above it all, King Kolkor slept, silent upon his bed, while his sons stood at a crossroads, one chained to duty, the other loose to fate. The people whispered that Yyth had turned his face from them. The priests argued that Yyth was testing them. The soldiers cared only for their pay, the merchants for their coin, the peasants for their bread. But in every whisper, every prayer, every tally of grain, one truth grew clear. The principality of Yyth was a throne without a voice, a crown without a king. And in that silence, choices were being made that would shape the realm for generations. Feast night. Arthur Greenpool oversaw it all, his quill scratching from dawn until dusk as he charted. Which storehouse gave what, which herds were culled, which mills ran longer. He was no warrior, no priest, but his magic was one of order, the kind that kept a principality alive when all else faltered. To him, the feast was not a mere show of grandeur, but a practical necessity. It was the moment to bind those called together, to prove that the crown still commanded loyalty and abundance, even as the king lay silent. Sir John ensured the guards stood ready, that no blade would find its way where it should not. For he knew well, when many gather, danger often hides in plain sight. Yondel and Jerim prepared not food nor guard, but blessings. They worked side by side for once, inscribing wards upon the walls of the feast hall, prayers of protection that shimmered faintly when the torches were lit. If treachery should come, Yondel said, let Yyth strike it before it strikes us. Jerim then stepped forward, his voice dry but commanding. Know this, the paths ahead are many, and none are safe. Lake Raven awaits some of you, Red Shale others, still more journeys will scatter across realm and sea. Yet, each of you is bound by thread unseen, woven into a tapestry none may yet glimpse. Fail, and the crown falters. Succeed, and Yyth himself shall remember your names. Then the musicians struck, the feasting began in earnest, and the hall filled with clamour and laughter. Yet beneath it all, a weight lingered, an understanding that this was no mere revel. It was a farewell, perhaps for some forever, the calling of names. The assassin, whose past was written in blood, yet whose future gleamed in the mage's sight. The two dwarves, one a cleric with hammer and hymn, the other a tinker whose gears and sparks could mend what steel alone could not. The diplomat, skilled in tongues and oaths, whose silver words might bind or break. The silver-crest mage, young, untested, yet marked by omen as bright as dawn. And the ranger, silent, sharp-eyed, at home in forest shadow. These were no ordinary companions for a prince. They were pieces upon a board only Yyth could see whole. Yyth, for his part, was delighted. He received the news in the feast hall, goblet in hand, laughter booming. To Lake Raven? He exclaimed, rising with arms spread. Then let it be done. Gather my companions, pour the wine, and we shall make pilgrimage of it. A prince must not walk alone, eh? Those around him cheered, though their voices were half-hearted. Many of the court knew his habits, knew how shallow his pursuits ran. Yet no one dared question the decree sealed by the vizier and the faith. Even folly, when cloaked in omen, could not be challenged. Red Shale and beyond. Meanwhile, a second party gathered, soldiers at their head, bound for Red Shale. This land to the south was rough and dangerous, a place of redstone ridges and mines long abandoned. Whispers spoke of raiders there, of dark things crawling from caves when the moon was high. To send rangers and rogues with soldiers into such ground was no light errand. But Yondel had seen the signs, smoke curling in his water bowl scrying, blood upon the dice of bone. Something waited there, something tied to the king's fate. All others will search as they wish, Arthur had said. And so it was. Ships would sail west, traders would carry questions east, scouts would vanish north into the high forests. The realm itself would become a net, each thread cast wide in search of the one catch that might restore the king. Shardel's vigil. The dawn that followed was pale and sullen, a sky streaked with iron clouds. Shardel stood upon the battlements, his cloak snapping in the wind, his hand resting upon the pommel of his sword. Below, the city stirred, merchants unbarring their stalls, children trailing. After goats, soldiers clattering into line for the morning drill. Yet none of it satisfied him. The eldest son was a man forged for battle and starved for it. His dark hair fell across his brow in strands, his eyes hard and searching. He had trained since boyhood with blade and bow, ridden in skirmishes along the borderlands, and earned scars that webbed his arms like old maps. Yet now, when his hand itched for steel, he was told to stay, to guard, to watch. When the vizier had spoken the night before, Shardel had not protested. He was too disciplined for that. But inside, a storm brewed. He knew his brother Yyth would ride to Lake Raven with companions chosen not for loyalty but for destiny itself. An assassin, dwarves, diplomat, ranger, boy. Strange company for a prince. Stranger still that Yythos's priests and mages had named them essential. Why not him? Why not the son who had given his blood to the crown already? Why chain him to walls, while others sought glory beneath the sky? He looked east, where the first line of sun broke through the cloud. Somewhere beyond those hills lay red shale, where soldiers and rangers would march. Further still was Lake Raven, its waters black and cold. His brother would be there, laughing, drinking, no doubt turning the errand into sport. Shardel clenched his jaw. If the king had been awake, he would have sent him, not Yyth. King Kolkor had known his heart, had trusted his arm, but the king lay silent, breathing shallow, his eyes shut to the world. And so the viziers and mages had spoken instead. Behind him, boots clicked softly on the stones. It was Sir John, his white surcoat marked with the golden triangle of Yythos. "You watch as though the walls will rise against us," the paladin said, his tone calm but edged. Shardel did not turn. Walls are strong only if the men behind them are. Sir John came to stand beside him, both men gazing over the city. "The vizier and the council have placed this charge upon you," he said. "It is not punishment. The kingdom needs a warden who can strike should peril breach the gates." Shardel's mouth twitched, a trace of bitterness. "And Yyth? What does the kingdom need of him at Lake Raven? A tally of his drinking cups? A count of the women who warm his bed?" "Yythos needs of him what you cannot see," Sir John replied simply. "Do not envy what has been chosen by the god. Guard what has been placed in your hand, for that is faith." Shardel did not answer. His eyes stayed on the horizon, where the land stretched wide and restless, calling him. Bated breath. Yondel rose and paced the length of the chamber, hands clasped behind him. "We preserve much," he said, "but we have also sent it outward. Each adventurer, each ranger, each emissary, though chosen with care, carries the potential to ignite upheaval. Perhaps in search of the king's cure, they will awaken long-buried conflicts. Perhaps they will stumble into plots that ripple across the realm." The four sat in a heavy silence, the lamplight flickering against stone walls as if uncertain whether to illuminate their counsel or hide them from the world beyond. The weight of their choices pressed upon them. For the first time, they understood fully that the principality they had preserved for so long now stood poised on the edge of change.